All right, we are live now. Hi, everybody. This is Adriana Alejandre from Latinx Therapy. We are chatting with Genesis Games from Florida. I'm going to go ahead and kick it to Genesis before I introduce the topic. Genesis, tell us who you are.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am Genesis. I am from Florida. I am the owner of Healing Connections, a totally online private practice. I live in Miami, but practice and see clients throughout all of Florida. I am also on Instagram as the Miami therapist, and I am very passionate about helping people improve their relationship wellness and their mental wellness. I believe that the two go hand in hand. And so a lot of the work that I do is with couples, with individuals recovering from heartbreak. I also work with college students and young adults that are going through life transitions, whether it is adjusting to being in a new country and being in a new culture, or it's maybe having your first adult grown up job and figuring out who you are in the corporate world or how do you fit in there. Or maybe you're struggling making adult friendships. Adult friendships can definitely be challenging. So those are basically the populations that I work with the most. And of course, I am bilingual and I work with Latinx clients. Most of my clients are actually Latinx.
Yes. And so everybody, this is like my first real time using this platform. I've used it once others, but I didn't play with the features. So bear with me as I am trying to get fancy with it. Welcome, Genesis. We did this live actually on Instagram, maybe in October, but it got deleted right when I was trying to publish it because of a Instagram error. So we are here talking about something really important, something really common also, first generation Latinx immigrants and mental health. So we're going to, use a little bit of intersectionality here with different identities and talk about this with the mental health perspective. So Genesis, where's your background from? Where are your parents from?
I'm Cuban American. So I am first generation. My parents came when they were in their 20s from Cuba. And I am the first generation to go to college to pursue higher education.
Yeah, thank you. Myself as well. However, my father is from Mexico and my mother de Guatemala, and
Mhm.
I am also first generation to go to college and to have a quote unquote professional job, right? To be estudiada and
Yes.
yeah, una profesional, the first one in the family. So there's a lot of pressures that come with being first generation. So let's go ahead and get into it. Um, Genesis, what defines first generation?
So, first generation is considered one of two groups of people. Either someone that immigrated to this country very young, and therefore did most of their schooling here. So, when I say schooling, I mean like K through 12. So, maybe someone that came when they were 6, when they were 7, they would still be considered first generation because, again, most of their schooling, most of their life really has been spent in this country. So, they've had a lot of the influence of this country and in the culture of the United States. And that would be one group. Group number two would be people like myself and you who were the first generation to be born in this country, but our parents are immigrants.
Yes. Okay. Because there are a lot of different or a few different contexts, in which first generation can be classified. So in this context is how we're going to be talking about first
Yes.
generation. So just for some clarity there. And what are some of the mental health concerns and things that you have seen? And I'll also talk
Mhm.
about my perspective when it comes with first generation Latinx immigrants.
I would say one of them is perfectionism. This need to get everything done perfectly, no room for failure. Like you said, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of eyes on us a lot of the times, or most of the times. I think there's this pressure of, our parents did so much to get here. The process of getting here and being able to establish themselves and be able to give us a better future and give us opportunities they didn't have in their country of origin, we have to like pay that back. And paying that back means we need to do everything perfectly. We need to be successful We need to go to school. We need to be estudiados. We need to be the first professionals in our family. In whatever path we take, we need to excel constantly. That expectation of excelling, I think, leads to perfectionism and having high anxiety around disappointing other people, letting other people down, feeling extreme guilt when those situations happen, or even at the possibility that those situations may happen. I would also say that there's difficulties regulating our emotions, dealing with anxiety, dealing with depression, dealing with guilt, dealing with disappointment, dealing with heartache, dealing with any overwhelming and unpleasant emotion. And a lot of times is because we haven't seen our parents, our caregivers, those in our family model how to handle those emotions in the healthiest of ways. Not necessarily because they didn't want to model it or because they didn't know. I think a lot of times most immigrants experience trauma at some point, whether they're leaving their country of origin because of trauma they've experienced, whether the trauma happens as they're in their journey to the United States, or the trauma happens in the United States, or in all of the above. There's trauma involved. And if that trauma never gets processed, what we're going to see is that our parents and our caregivers are in the survival mode. And so when someone is in survival mode, they're not regulating their emotions. They're not in tune with what's happening in their emotional world. They're not connecting the dots of like what's triggering these emotions in me, what helps me feel better, how can I change the way that I feel, how can I get a different outcome. So a lot of times, again, if our parents are in survival mode, they're not modeling for us healthy emotion regulation. Therefore, that leads to us not knowing how to regulate our emotions, and often leading to substance abuse or addiction issues, engaging in addictive behaviors as a way to regulate. Because no one likes to feel miserable all the time, is what I always tell my clients. So we're going to find a way to self-soothe, and it's not necessarily always going to be the healthiest way, but it's either going to be what's accessible to us, what we know, or what we've seen modeled.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that what came up for me when you were talking about, the emotional regulation is that sometimes in my experience, I've also seen that parents are making an attempt to learn how to emotionally regulate themselves, and their children are now adults, and the parents want a better relationship with their adult children, first gen children, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it seems like it's too late. Like the children have so much resentment built up because there
Mm-hmm.
was so much emotional abuse or other forms of abuse
Mm-hmm.
growing up that it diffutes whatever present efforts the immigrant parents are making now to change their ways. And all of this takes a lot of patience, boundaries, and maybe even distance. And we'll talk about
Mm-hmm.
the mental health strategies right afterwards, but along with this, I think that there's so much validity in what you're saying. And, myself, and I'm sure many people that are going to be watching this can resonate because we've experienced a lot of that. And codependency comes up. You mentioned
Yes.
codependency in the sense of self-soothing using substances, but
Mm-hmm.
codependency can also be, it's filling that emotional void with either people, relationships, right, that are not healthy for you, but
Mm-hmm.
also other items such as substances or technology
Food.
or food,
Yep.
um, sex, money,
Mm-hmm.
materialistic
Humans.
things, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
so many different ways of building a relationship and being codependent. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that as a first generation, individual, it's important to kind of keep an eye and be aware of these things that we are building codependency with, because
Mm-hmm.
through awareness is how we're going to be able to change them. And specifically with first generation Latinx immigrants, I think there's also different forms of codependency, like overworking, being
Yes.
overproductive, right,
Mm-hmm.
in order to prove a point. I think you were touching upon that too.
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of the most common ones, and also one of the trickiest ones because, well, I'm overworking. What's wrong with that, right? Like, I'm being responsible. I'm making sure that my family has everything they need, that their needs are met. I'm, going above and beyond because I want my children to have a better future. So, like, what's wrong with that, right? But I think it's definitely this mindset that we have to always be hustling, that we always have to be going above and beyond, that our value is in our paycheck and not in who we are as a person, not in the way that we relate to those that we love, but rather in, the money that we have in our bank account. I think it's also this sense of insecurity with money, and I see that a lot because although yes, I think for most immigrants, when you first get to this country, money is going to be scarce. However, eventually people tend to do better for themselves. Not necessarily mean that they're wealthy, but they tend to do better for themselves where they don't need to be saving every penny, or they don't need to be hustling 24/7 to make ends meet anymore. That's not the reality anymore. However, we're still in the survival mode. Even if that's not the reality, that's how we're perceiving it. There's still this fear that is fueling our behaviors. And so feeling like rest is not something that I deserve. Like I don't deserve to rest. I have to be actively doing something all the time, whether it's in the house or it's something that is going to be lucrative and providing me money. But I don't feel comfortable with money, no matter where it is that I am financially, no matter, how what I have in my savings account, no matter what the situation is, I can never feel comfortable financially, and I can never allow myself to just rest or just to pamper myself and enjoy some luxury, right? Like pamper myself and just reward myself for my hard work and my efforts.
Yeah, I think that survival mentality of being in the future, of living in the future versus the present, is
Mhm.
very real. And I wanna validate and say that we see that as something that makes sense. Why you would
Yeah.
think that way too, because things come up, right, with
Mhm.
status. Um,
Mhm.
Latinx immigrants are always under threat as well,
Mhm.
or it feels like there's always a threat to being able to stay, right? DACA is, there's always like the DHS is putting out notices or
Mhm.
attempts to break away that program. So, there's that preparation that, yeah, it's important to stay in the present, but it makes sense why you would be thinking, ahead and always being kind of financially, not frugal, but como se dice, like financially careful,
Yeah,
right?
cautious.
Yeah, cautious because there's a true need for the what
Mhm.
if. And so balancing that out is pivotal for just sanity, I think.
Mhm.
I think having some boundaries with that, but again, we'll talk about that in a little bit, how to be able to help yourself with that like pressure. And I think
Mhm.
most of this chunk of this conversation, we're talking about the individuals that are um secure financially, and I think have better chances of, I think with status, so that
Mhm.
because again, this makes sense as to why you would have to be living in the future if you are
Mhm.
secure with your status and
Mhm.
financially, but living in the future, always thinking like, I need something for XYZ case. I need
Mhm.
more money for this. And I can relate to this in an extent with through my mom, where she has been financially secure, and we could, classify her as being first gen from
Mhm.
her Guatemalan side of her family, being living here in the States. Didn't get to go to school here or get una carrera,
Right.
but has maintained her job. And even though my father, when we were younger, was able to provide a secure financial household, and then we grew up and we've been providing for her, she has
Mhm.
always maintained this mentality of just, I'm going to be poor one day, because she grew up
Mhm.
super, super, super poor. So
Mhm.
regardless of all the cars she has, regardless of the bills being met, right?
Mhm.
There's going to always be this fear
Fear.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, losing it all. And then so there's a lot that goes into this.
Absolutely. And so I'm glad that you differentiated that, because for some people there's definitely this threat that, I may be deported, someone in my family may be deported. We need to have money. Like we can't just rely on one income, or we can't just rely on we have money today. Something big may happen. There might be a big shift and we need to be ready for that. And so that's a very valid, very real fear about a threat that is imminent and that it's happening in the present and in the here and now. But like you were saying, how you were, sharing about your mom, that's a very deep rooted fear that was also present and very much in the here and now back then, but that now she's come a very long way from that, right? Like there's safety nets in place for her. There's a support network for her. And so the fact that that fear still kind of takes over and controls the way that, she behaves, the way that she relates to other people, the way that she even relates to herself, like what she gives herself permission to enjoy and to do. That is where it becomes problematic, because you're not in a situation of imminent danger in this moment. There's no imminent threat in this moment, yet the past is controlling the present and the future.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what we hear with a lot of first gen Latinx immigrants, even of our generation
Yeah,
that experience that.
absolutely.
And there's also hoarding that goes into this, potential
Yes.
hoarding of items, of sentimental items, but then also of items that they could potentially sell, right, in the future
Yes.
for the just in case. And so
Yes.
again, it's there, these are creating these mental health challenges. And I want to touch upon the concern specifically. Right, there's a lot of anxiety that's going into
Mhm.
these topics of,
Mhm.
I have to be future oriented, right?
Mhm.
I have to be secure financially, or attempt to. That's anxiety. But then
Mhm.
in chasing this like invisible carrot leads to depression as well, because there's this hopelessness of status, even hopelessness
Mhm.
of dreams being able to be fulfilled, or even comparing your lives, right, with your peers, and seeing
Mhm.
that your road is much more difficult in comparison to others.
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
other things can you add to these specific mental health challenges?
I think you're touching on two really important ones. The American dream being like this invisible carrot that we're chasing that we may not even relate to, right? I think that there's this like general idea of the proverbial American dream. You go to school, you get a degree, you start working, you save enough money to buy yourself a house with a white picket fence, you get married, you have two kids, you have a dog, get yourself a minivan, and you go on a 2 week vacation somewhere else, and you're happy with that life. Like that is what life looks like. You're happy and you're satisfied with that life. And that is not necessarily going to be fulfilling for everyone. For some people, they're going to feel on top of the world when they achieve that. They're going to be happy and satisfied for the rest of their life with that. But for other people, that's not what they want. Not everyone wants marriage. Not everyone wants kids. Not everyone wants to have a mortgage for a house. For some people, it may not be something that is feasible. They may want it, but it may not be something that seems feasible or realistic. They may have other situations going on. I think, again, as first gen Latinx, a lot of times we feel this responsibility to care for our parents financially, because maybe have a disability. They can no longer work the essential positions that they tend to have, which tend to be very physically demanding. And so we have other responsibilities, or we have other concerns that we need to address that may make it difficult or not really possible to fulfill the proverbial American dream. And on the flip side, some people might not be happy with the proverbial American dream. Again, like the corporate job is not for everyone. A 9 to 5 is not for everyone. A family with children and a dog and the minivan is not for everyone. And so feeling like you have to fit into this box, and that there's this pressure from society, there's this pressure from your parents and from everyone expecting you to fulfill that, can definitely lead to depression, can create a lot of anxiety when you feel like you're falling behind, or when you're feeling like you don't have what it takes to achieve that. But also a lot of depression, this sense of hopelessness, like you were saying, comparing yourself to other people who maybe are not first generation or second generation, so they have different advantages, or just people that are not immigrants, that they're born here, don't have immigrant families, and have different advantages that you don't have. And so seeing how hard you're working, all the effort that you're putting, all your dedication, yet it seems like you can't get that much ahead. And for other people, it's just so simple. Like it seems like they just show up and they have everything. And now That's not necessarily the case, but that's what it may seem for us. So definitely a lot of anxiety, definitely a lot of depression when we feel stuck or when we feel like we're trying to do something that doesn't resonate with us, that is not really who we want to be. And I think a lot of the issues, a lot of the mental health issues that can come up for first generation Latinx, like we were talking, substance abuse, addictive behaviors, codependency with a person, but codependency also with certain behaviors, eating disorders, all of that is usually fueled by this general anxiety and this depression, and kind of almost like jumping between one and the other one, right? Sometimes I'm very anxious because I really want to get something done. I really want to prove something to someone. But then when I feel like I can't do that or I'm not doing that fast enough, then the depression kicks in.
Yes, completely. And something that you brought up right now brought me back to assimilation, right? The process of, for many immigrants coming here, you have to assimilate. You have to kind of erase your culture in a way to
Mhm,
blend in with your community, or your new community, with the people here. And so I think this erasure of culture and values is something that some first gen Latinx immigrants do in order to survive as well,
mhm,
depending on geographic area where they're being situated, and school, right? If you come here younger, and if are dressing different than other children, then you're going to most likely get picked on, right?
mhm,
Because unfortunately culture creates or makes us a little bit more vulnerable sometimes, because
mhm,
being different is, at least here in the American culture, unfortunately, is a ticket into being bullied. And
absolutely.
so for this survival strategy, I've also, processed a lot of that, just erasure of cultural identities in order to be able to just survive, get good grades, um,
Mhm,
and make friends, make
mhm,
communities here. And
mhm,
that creates a lot of internal conflict with yourself, and resentment as well.
mhm,
If your parents are here with you, or maybe even if they're not, resentment towards your family as well. Like, wasn't I born here? Why
mhm,
couldn't I have come younger, right? Again, that comparison is very, very
mhm.
common. But that was the last thing that came up for me. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we talk about the tools?
Also, just piggybacking on what you were saying, also generational tensions. I think sometimes, parents have a fear that there's going to be an erasure of the culture and of the values. But the kids or the younger generations, like you said, for survival purposes, because they don't want to be bullied in school, they want to make friends, they want to fit in, they want to have a life. They do assimilate and do things like the white way or the American way. And I think that can create a lot of tensions with like parents and grandparents, and just feeling like I'm not this and I'm not that. I'm like in this weird limbo where I don't fully identify with one culture, but I also don't fully identify with the other culture. And then it even becomes more complex with, for example, someone like yourself, where you have Guatemalan in you and you have Mexican in you, and then you're in the United States, right? And there's this blend, because we are very different, right? Latinx culture is very different. It has all these different subcultures. So really feeling like you can't fully identify with one because you'll be damned, and just having to flip between one and the other can definitely create a lot of tension and a lot of stress.
Yeah, it's sometimes for some folks, it's like living two different lives,
Mhm.
right? You're one person at school, you're one person with your friends or at work, and then you're another when you get home. And so it's about finding a blend for all of your identities versus rejecting the identities.
Right.
So let's go into the mental health tools. What are some tools and strategies that we can provide for first generation
Mhm.
Latinx immigrants?
I would say number one is seeking community. I think community is essential. We can do things, we can't heal alone, we can't grow alone. We're not islands. We're meant to be connected. We're wired for connection. We thrive when we're connected with other people. And so, really trying to find ways where you can seek community. And that's going to be more challenging for people in certain geographical areas and a lot easier for people in other geographical areas. So, I absolutely understand that. But I think a lot of things are virtual these days, which makes it a little bit easier to connect with different people. And some of those communities can be first generation college students and kind of like an organization or like maybe a LinkedIn group or a Facebook group of first generation college students or first generation professionals, first generation entrepreneurs, whatever the case may be. But finding a community that you can be a part of where people that have similar stories as yourself and have similar goals are part of this community and can provide you with support and can normalize what you're going through. Because again, if you are having all of these experiences on your own, especially if you are in a city or in a place where there's not a lot of other Latinx folks, it's going to feel like this is only your reality, that this doesn't happen to anyone else, that there's something wrong with you because you can't assimilate or you can't, you're struggling with your identities, you're struggling with your feelings, you're having these bouts of anxiety and these bouts of depression, you're having, this excessive guilt. And so finding people that are experiencing similar things and are also have similar goals can be very helpful. Number two, I would say, is really checking in with our stories. And I think we have stories about a lot of different things that kind of guide the way that we function in the world. Our stories with money, we talked about money earlier. Our stories with money, our stories with relationships, I think are really important. A lot of times there's enmeshment and we're way too attached or way too codependent to certain people in our lives. And we saw that at home, right? And now we're repeating it as adults. A lot of times that's fueled because of guilt. And so really checking our stories with relationships, checking our stories with boundaries. Do we feel guilty and selfish and evil when we try to set a boundary with someone? Checking our stories with success. What is success to us? Is a proverbial American dream what you want to achieve? Or would success look differently for you? If you allowed yourself to define success and you didn't allow your family or your community or anyone else to define success for you, what would be the definition of success? And I think if we can get clear about these stories, that's going to help us have this mindset shift so that we can move differently, we can think differently, we can behave differently and make choices that are more authentic to us. I would also explore my identities. I would explore my identities from, my parents' country of origin and also my American identity. What are the things that I like from my identities that I want to keep? And what are the things that I want to do away with? It kind of creating a marriage that has this like mix that is authentic to me. It's not what other people are suggesting that I do or that I think or that I behave or the values that I should hold, but rather the values and traditions that feel authentic to me from all the different identities that form me. And lastly, I would suggest finding a Latinx therapist, and you should probably check the Latinx directory for some therapists around the United States. But I definitely think that it's important to have a therapist that knows and understands the nuances of intersectionality, of being Latinx, of being Black and Latinx, of being Latinx, born and raised in the Bronx versus being someone that's maybe Latinx that was born and raised in Kansas. Understanding of culture, tradition, religion, spirituality, all of these different things that are very much important in the Latinx community, and that can be sources of tension when they're not addressed or when we are living to fulfill other people's expectations. So really getting clear about those things and being able to explore those things with a therapist that understands that you won't have to be explaining and defining terms and concepts and just phenomena that happen within the Latinx community. I think can be very helpful and instrumental for healing.
Thank you, Genesis. As you see, I'm trying to
I
get
love
fancy here, so I'm juggling. But yes, absolutely. I think all those points are really, really important. And I think, I know firsthand that there's a lot of first generation Latinx immigrants that are not ready for therapy also. So if that is you, I want to say that that's okay.
Mhm.
You don't if you're ready, awesome, go for it. But if you are not ready, there are things that you can do to get ready or to find, your source of healing. And that could be through
Mhm.
self-help books. That
Mhm.
could be through listening to podcasts or, learning more through YouTube. And it's a matter of finding what it is that is impacting you the most today these days.
Mhm.
And is that increasing your levels of anxiety? Is that increasing more triggers in the form of trauma
Mhm.
memories? I don't want to throw out the word trauma too loosely, right? And
Mhm.
I think that's another topic though. But I think what makes you also get visits from depression. So it's about finding out what impacts you and learn more about it. There's also many great workbooks that you can do independently as well.
Mhm.
But the first thing that Genesis mentioned, which is finding community, that is huge with healing. If you
Mhm.
do not have anybody here, please reach out to us. We will help you with finding circles. We want to, be a resource for you. Mental Health America has free support groups also. So, I know it can be intimidating being, opening up in a circle, especially coming from a background, a culture that says,
Mhm.
that we need to superar and we need to do it ourselves.
Mhm.
But it is really important to allow yourself to practice asking for help and practice
Mhm.
giving yourself permission to receive help as well. So those can be some of the other smaller but very
Mhm.
deep rooted things that you can do for your mental well-being. So Mental Health America has some support circles, and also NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, also has support groups, whether you are a loved one of someone that has a mental illness, or you just want to connect with people that want to talk about mental health. They have groups for you. And they both have Spanish speaking groups as well, and these are free. So be sure to check them out. Again, I'm going to link them in the description. Just give me a day from when this post and it'll be on there. And I think practice tuning in to your body as well. So
Mhm.
where are your experiences of your immigration story, of your story with your relationship with others, of what's going on
Mhm.
in the present? Where are all of those things living in your body? Because your body is a vessel. It carries all of these experiences, situations, and messages that we receive, all the
Mhm.
stimulation. And if we do not practice letting it out, we're building up tension and tension and tension, and we're getting
Mhm.
so tense. Okay. Like that is a fact. And so learning how to allow your body to calm, to soothe it, because this
Mhm.
isn't mental health, isn't just mental. It's about, blending, finding alliance between the mind and the body, bringing them
Mhm.
together. They're not separate. And we tend to grow up thinking that they are separate,
Mhm.
right? We ignore the body and we just focus on the mind. So I want you to really practice tuning into your body. Where is it living? And helping yourself, even if it's through your own touch. If it's through exercise, if it's through breathing, if it's
Mhm.
through drumming, whatever helps you to release some of that tension in your body, please practice. It's trial and error phase. Some
Mhm.
things work, some things don't work, and that's okay, but just tune into yourself.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned like self-help and how you mentioned all these different things that we can learn to do on our own. And I think one of the big ones too is just Instagram. Instagram can really give you a sense of community. There's a lot of therapists that look like you, speak like you, that are on Instagram that you don't have to have a professional relationship with, but that you can follow. And you can learn some exercises to help you ground yourself. You can learn exercises to help you be more in tune with your body and your emotions, that can really kind of normalize what you're going through, what you're experiencing, and give you vocabulary, right? To be able to understand and put into words what my experience is like. And none of that is the formal relationship of therapy. I think for some people, they might get to a point where they realize I've done a lot of growth on my own, but I realize that there's like this block here. And no matter what I do, like I can't get over that block. That might be a sign that this is the time to bring a professional to help me. For other people, you might be able to handle it well, just with community, with maybe bringing spirituality in, teaching yourself, going through, through like online courses, videos, being part of NAMI, being part of all these different things might be enough for your healing. So I think the main idea is that healing is different for everyone, and the healing journey is very different and very individualized for everyone. So just because something worked for me, or something worked for your coworker, something worked for your brother, may not necessarily work for you, and that doesn't mean that there is something totally wrong with you. It just means that we're all different, and we all respond differently to different things at different times.
Beautifully put. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Genesis. And another point that came up, and maybe we can talk more about this in a podcast episode or in a part 2 of this, but it's how first gen Latinx immigrants are dealing with these values and messages that we've grown up with, right? Such as like, we don't go to therapy because we don't talk to others. What you should do is you should pray to God. So that's a whole other thing, but explore those messages as another thing. What are creating some of that internal and external clashes for you to be able to accept helping yourself from others. And yeah, I think I just want to end it right there. Thank you so much, Genesis.
Thank you so much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yes. Where can people find you, Genesis? Tell us.
You can find me on Instagram as The Miami Therapist. You can find me on Twitter as @MiamiTherapist_. And you can also check my website, healingconnectionstherapy.com. I have a blog that you can sign up for, and I have a lot of resources available as well.
Okay. I don't know if the banner is that right? Healing Connections Therapy.
Healingconnections-therapy.com.
Okay, my bad. Let me try that again. Healing Connections dash
yes
therapy. Okay, I'm gonna get this. Did I get it?
Perfect.
Okay, so there it is. And you see both of our handles on Latinx Therapy. If you go to the regions on our highlight section, as Genesis mentioned, following therapists that are, on Instagram is very helpful. So in our highlight section, we have many therapists on there. So you can check that out. Genesis is on there as well. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much, Genesis. Again, thank you. I'm glad this is going to save. We will chat next time.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye.